Welcome to the deep dive. I'm really glad you could join us today. We're exploring some, well, let's just say profound and sometimes pretty challenging historical ideas. Our topic, settler colonial empire and genocides.
Yeah.
The two sides of the same coin. Now, the source material we're looking at today, it offers a really critical perspective, kind of pushes us to rethink some basic concepts. So our mission, like always, is to pull out the key insights, the most important bits from these sources, basically give you a shortcut to being properly informed on what is, let's face it, a complex subject. We're talking facts, clear explanations.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's unpack this.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating right off the bat is how the source, it doesn't just give us facts, it actually frames history itself as a critical tool, for understanding these really complex processes. It's really pushing for a scientific, a rigorous way of looking at the past. Moving beyond just anecdotes or myths we might have heard, this isn't just about telling stories, it's investigation.
That's a really strong place to start because, okay, before we can even talk about empires and genocides, we need to get clear on what history means, according to this source anyway. Our sources really stress that history isn't, just a bunch of old tales or gossip. It's presented as a science, one that researches, analyzes, documents societal events. It makes a sharp distinction between that and, say, fiction or propaganda. It's about getting rid of the noise, the impurities.
Precisely. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, the source argues that not knowing your own history, or even the history of, say, an adversary, it's like having a full cup of water pouring in the wrong direction. That's the quote. It suggests that without that foundation, real self-identity is difficult. And understanding the present, it gets really compromised. So the scientific view of 𝗧, it has no expiration date. That's another key phrase, because the past, it isn't static, is it? It keeps shaping the present. If you don't get yesterday, how can you possibly understand today? It's active work, uncovering things, bringing hidden truths out.
I like that analogy. The water pouring the wrong way really captures that idea of like wasted effort, right? So building on that, the source then zooms in on the power structures we're looking at, starting with how it breaks down the roots of empire and colony. Goes right back to Latin, imperium. The root of empire, it means to command, to control, to rule by force. Straight up. It's not about gentle influence, it's dominion. Often military dominion.
And colony, also from Latin, it refers directly to land and people seized by that power. These aren't just abstract academic terms for the source. No, they describe real, often very violent acts, acquisition, control. The word colonist comes from colonist, someone who works the land. So a colony is literally where land is taken and worked, often not by the original people.
Okay, so we've got those core definitions down. But then, this is where it gets really interesting. The source draws a critical line. Shows us that not all colonialism is the same thing. It actually lays out two fundamentally different types. First, metropolitan colonialism. Think of the classic examples the source gives. London ruling African colonies or Paris ruling African colonies. The key thing here. The colonizers, they generally go back home eventually. They rule from afar. They extract resources, yes, but they don't plan to permanently replace the population. It's more like a temporary occupation for profit.
Right. And that's a stark contrast to what the source calls settler colonialism. It even uses a specific term, 𝗬𝗪𝗔𝗪. And this distinction is, well, it's vital. The source hammers home that 𝗬𝗪𝗔𝗪 isn't just control, it's permanent resettlement. The colonizers don't go back, they come to stay for good. And this permanence, this drives a whole different dynamic. Actions the source flat out calls genocide and enslavement. It's termed a settler colonial genocidal act because the act of settling, of staying, it inherently requires, eliminating or dominating the people already there.
So it's not just taking over, it's replacing. That's a huge difference.
Exactly. And a critical point the source makes is that these settlers actively work to erase identity, the identity of the indigenous people. They establish dominion over the seized land, and they build the system described as 𝗖𝗔, which the source calls a viral modus operandi, like a virus, designed to replicate, to spread through the indigenous society and basically consume it. And the source is very direct here. It states, settler colonialism is structural, not an event.
Structural, not an event. What does that really imply for us, though?
Well, it means that even generations later, the very systems, land laws, education, the economy, they might still contain the DNA of that original violence, shaping everything today. Resource distribution, cultural identity, often in ways we don't even notice immediately. It's not just a bad thing that happened way back when. It's the foundation the new society was built on.
That really reframes how we think about history, doesn't it? It's moving beyond just single events to seeing a whole system. So if we accept settler colonialism as this structural, ongoing thing, how does it work? The source gives us a really clear breakdown, divides the tools into hardware and software. Let's start with the hardware, the physical stuff. Okay, so we're talking weapons, rifles, cannons, what the source calls neft.
Yep, the instruments of war, but it's broader than just the weapons.
Right. Is it also about the infrastructure, like forts, roads built for troops?
Yeah.
Kind of physical presence.
Absolutely. It's the whole physical machine. The hardware includes the weapons, sure, but also the people wielding them. Soldiers, militia, bandits, and tragically, the source mentions traitors or slaves too, people co-opted or forced into the system, becoming part of that oppressive machinery themselves. It's about establishing a physical dominance, an undeniable presence.
And then there's the software. This is the psychological side. The manipulation, the mind games.
That's right. The software is the ideological fuel. It includes ideas, myths, stories, propaganda, beliefs, things like religion, ethnicity, culture. And this software is used strategically. On one hand, for self-praise, boosting the colonizer's ego, their sense of being superior. But on the other hand, it's weaponized, used to curse, defame, humble, dirty, and destroy the colonized people. That's the source's language. It includes laws of oppression and punishment. It's all part of a logic of total elimination, where violence is dressed up with ideological jingoism and theological chauvinism. So it's not just physical conquest. It's building a story, a narrative that makes the violence seem justified, making the indigenous people seem less human, their land seem empty or wasted, ready for the taking. And that mental colonization, that can be even more damaging in the long run than the physical side. It echoes through generations.
That is a truly chilling combination. Physical force backed up by deep psychological warfare.
So with this hardware and software framework, what were the actual methods, the practical steps the source highlights, the things done to establish and keep this settler colonial control? Were there any specific examples that jumped out at you?
Oh, definitely. The source lists quite a few grim examples that make it very real. First, obviously, land acquisition and territorial expansion.
Yeah.
Foundational, often just outright seizure. Then there's the deliberate effort of producing a colonized mind. Basically reshaping how the colonized think about themselves.
Yep.
Through education, media, propaganda, making them internalize the idea that they're inferior, that their own culture is backward.
Wow. So it's not just taking their home, but trying to take their very sense of who they are. Exactly. And linked to that is demographic engineering, which isn't just displacement. It's actively trying to change the ethnic makeup of the place. Forced migrations, population transfers, things like that. The methods also include enslaving people like animals, selling them, and seizing and burning all types of wealth. This isn't just control, it's active destruction of their economy, their society, plus displacing and seizing land from Aboriginals, obviously, and crucially, defaming and cursing the identity of the people to make the subjugation seem legitimate.
And it sounds like it gets even more insidious than that. The source talks about how the colonizers become a burden, right? Enriching themselves while impoverishing everyone else, using myths and stories as if they were truth, creating this false reality, nurturing their own pride, and even using phrases to stop people from seeing what's happening, like that quote, "If I die, this land will rot. Your intestines will melt like butter." That's pure psychological manipulation, isn't it? Making people feel dependent on their oppressor.
It's a profound form of coercion, yeah, both physical and mental. So where does all this lead? What are the ultimate aims of settler colonialism, according to the source?
Well, it outlines very clear goals. A lot revolve around getting resources and systematic destruction, as we've seen. It identifies a primary source of wealth, seizing and selling people's wealth, human labor. The system is designed to enslave, impoverish the locals while simultaneously enriching themselves, the settlers.
And unlike metropolitan colonialism, it's not just about sending wealth back home, is it? It's about supporting the settlers there on the stolen land. Precisely. A key goal is satisfying the settlers, Safari Exodus, on that seized land. And that requires controlling and commanding through armed force, punishing anyone who resists. It also means things like gathering people, like cattle in concentration camps, and using torture. The source uses very specific, very strong terms for the final outcomes, genocide and ethnocide. Specifically, settler, colonial genocide, and ethnocide, which includes elimination, eviction, displacement, resettlement, all of those. It also adds politicide, political genocide, destroying a people's ability to govern themselves. And then the big overarching term, democide, from demo people, side kill, mass murder by the state, or colonizing power. And connecting this back, the source argues these aren't just unfortunate side effects. No, they are the core, intertwined objectives of this kind of system, baked right into its design from the start.
It's a deeply disturbing but comprehensive picture. A systematic process aimed at total transformation through terrible means. Our source then takes these ideas and applies them to a specific historical case, using the 5W1H who, what, when, where, why, how framework for the settler colonial Abyssinian Empire.
Right. And in that case study, the source lists various crimes committed during the empire's creation. And it points critically to the role of things like myths, like the myth of Christianity used to justify it all. It names a key figure, Menelik the Democider, and his killer hordes, describes their invasion, occupation, and settlements of the Neftenias in the south. Now, the Neftenias, these were the armed settlers. They were given land in the conquered areas. They essentially became the front line of this new system, living off the local labor and resources. So this example directly shows the hardware, the soldiers, the software, the justifying myths, and the methods land seizure demographic change that we talked about.
So it brings the theory crashing into a specific, painful historical reality?
Exactly. And the sources wrap up this section with a really powerful statement about the system. It says, the settler colonial Nafsananya system of Abyssinia was born and died. Trying to resurrect it when it is on its deathbed is to be buried with it. Which really makes you think, doesn't it? What does that final statement mean about the legacy, the future of these systems? It feels like a stark warning that you have to recognize when a historical era is truly over, and that trying to revive systems built on such violence, especially when they're already collapsing, well, it's futile and dangerous. It suggests you can't artificially prop up that kind of structural violence once its foundations are gone without dragging yourself down with it.
Wow, that is a stark warning. But maybe also suggests these systems aren't necessarily permanent. So, reflecting on all this, what really stands out to you from this deep dive? I mean, the structural nature of settler colonialism, its devastating aims, its heavy stuff, but it feels so important for understanding our world, doesn't it? How story shaped the present, the legacies of these power structures. We've seen how the source carefully differentiates colonialism types, dissects the hardware and software of control, all aiming for elimination.
Yeah, what really hits home for me is how these sources push us, they compel us to look critically at how history gets written, how it's often manipulated, and how these different colonial forms have just profoundly shaped the world we inhabit now. It really urges us to look past simple stories, doesn't it? To grasp the deep structural roots, how they still define identity, power, even who owns what land, right up to today. And that core idea, history as a science, not a collection of convenient myths, that's a call for real intellectual honesty. Facing these truths, however uncomfortable, it leaves us with a big question, I think. If a system is structural, how do we actually identify and maybe dismantle its lingering effects today, generations later, in ways that go beyond just saying sorry for specific past wrongs? How do we tackle the structure?
That is a powerful question to end on. How do we confront the ongoing structural presence of the past in our present? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope this exploration has given you plenty to think about and maybe encourages you to continue your own research into these vital historical insights. Until next time, keep digging.